So I started this channel with the idea that I was going to first start playing Final Fantasy Rebirth, just because of where it's at in the moment in pop culture discussions and all that. I know that there's a lot of controversy around it. And while I am of the group of people that actually enjoy the game, I have slowly started integrating myself into the group of people that enjoy the game, but we can no longer, be oblivious to the fact that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not a remake of Final Fantasy VII. Anybody that says that Final Fantasy VII remake, the trilogy, whatever they got going on right now, that it is a one-to-one remake of, the OG, or that it captures the soul and the identity of what the OG 7 version was, is lying. However, due to unforeseeable circumstances, I had to travel, I had to leave my PlayStation, and I don't have access to any of the of the newer Final Fantasies. I have access to all the Final Fantasies from 1 to 15, excluding 11 and 14, because we're not going to talk about those right now. I sat down and I was like, you know what? Which Final Fantasy game should I then start or continue the channel with, since I don't have access to Remake, Rebirth, 16, and things like that? And I made a post on my TikTok, I made a post on my YouTube, Instagram and Facebook and things like that. This is when I understood. This is how I knew. And all of this has been in less than 24 hours. I think I made the post yesterday at the time of this recording. It was kind of an experiment to see if I would get any type of responses into the video, just to start like building up the channel and things like that. And my channels are completely brand new. Completely brand new. You can basically say that they have 0 subscribers, 0 followers, all of that sort. I have maybe a handful of followers at this point. So the comments that I'm getting from this are people that have no association with me. They don't know who I am. They have no bias into the type of content that I'm going to make and things like that, because it's brand new. So all the comments that I've been getting feel very real, feel very authentic. And this is when I started to go down the rabbit hole. What the heck is going on with Square Enix and its modern Final Fantasy titles? Now, I want to clarify, or big disclaimer before I go into this rant or whatever the case. I love Final Fantasy. From 1 to 16, I have played the vast majority of them in some way, shape, or form. I may not have been in all of them, but I have played all of them in some way, shape, or form. I have my favorites, and because of the time of era that I started playing Final Fantasy, they are a little bit newer compared to some of the people that have been playing them from the very beginning. My favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy X. That was the first Final Fantasy that I actually sat down, played through. It spoke to me. The story spoke to me. Everything just clicked for me. Final Fantasy X. That's my game. And it has been for the last 20 years of my life. Final Fantasy VII was one of the other Final Fantasies that, just clicked with me right when I played it. And I played Final Fantasy VII for the first time when I was a kid, but I didn't really understand English very much at that point. And my uncle was very, very adamant that I do everything gaming in English, even if they had the options for Spanish and things like that, because they were trying to teach me how to speak English at that point. So I have very fond memories of watching my uncle play Final Fantasy VII. But then when I played it as an adult, I fell in love with it. But, all in all, the game is a solid 9 out of 10. 10 out of 10 for Final Fantasy 10 for me. 9 out of 10 for Final Fantasy 7. And then I've played some of the other ones, sparingly. I went through Final Fantasy 13, just the first one. Haven't played the full trilogy. Despite the controversy around Final Fantasy 13, when it came out, I clicked with it. I liked it very much. Now, in retrospect, I definitely understand more of its shortcomings, but it was a fun game. When we're talking about retro, my uncle was the one that got me into gaming, and he was gaming from the SNES era or whatnot. So he introduced me to Final Fantasy 1 through 9 at that point. And because at that point in time I was still a little bit immature, I didn't really vibe with the pixel aesthetic and things like that. I really pushed everything that was before 7 to the wayside until I was much older. But then I found gems like Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V is one of my all-time favorite Final Fantasies just because of the job system in itself. Final Fantasy VI, I've played just maybe like an hour here and there, whatnot. Like I've always seen the intro, the classic, the three mechs walking on the snow. That is iconic in itself. But I've never really played the game. It's the one that I'm going to be jumping in soon because all the comments that came or all the suggestions that came from my question of which Final Fantasy should I play was maybe not surprising now that I think about it, but surprisingly enough, 6 and 9 were the top two contenders. 10, I would say it was the second or third contender in the list, but because I've played 10 so many times, I'm not really putting that one as a priority. But a lot of people, recommended 6. So I am going to jump on 6 as the continuation of the Final Fantasy games that I'm playing for this channel. Now, all that said and done, what I noticed out of all of these comments and suggestions is that the majority of the fans of Final Fantasy fans are still very, very keen to suggesting the older titles as opposed to the newer titles. I think that Final Fantasy X is where you see the clear cutoff. Not a lot of people suggest even to try those games. There are some outliers, and to the defense of those people, I do believe that if that is your first Final Fantasy, or if that is your favorite Final Fantasy, like you're in all your right to feel that way. I like some of the newer titles. I like 13, I like 15, I played the crap out of 16. I love those titles. However, the longer that I spend time in those games, the more I realize that they do not hit the same. I made a list of all the suggested Final Fantasies 1 through 15, which are the ones that I have access to, including some of the spin-offs within 10 and 10-2 and the trilogy of 13, right? Final Fantasy VI had 23 votes, following by Final Fantasy X with 21 votes, and shortly followed by Final Fantasy IX with 19 votes. Now, as a person that has recently gotten into gaming after maybe like a 15-20 year hiatus, the first type of game series that I looked to jump into as soon as I bought my PlayStation was Final Fantasy. And, luckily for me, at that moment, all these new Final Fantasy games were coming out. 7 Remake, 7 Rebirth, Final Fantasy 16. I was like, God damn, I hit the jackpot. And boy, was I disappointed with those. I really did enjoy 7. 7 Remake. 7 Remake, I think it gets a little bit overhated. However, now I understand why it gets the hate that it does. Square Enix did a switcheroo. They were very dishonest with the type of game that we were going to get by titling it or naming it remake. Because me, as a person that has played the OG 7, watched Advent Children, loved it. I know some people don't like it or whatnot. I like anything Final Fantasy 7 as part of like media consumption and entertainment, right? I really like those characters and whatnot. I really dug Final Fantasy 7 Advent Children, and anything that has had the Final Fantasy 7 DNA sprinkled across, like Kingdom Hearts and things like that. I've always ate that shit up. I played 7 Remake and I loved it. And I was like, I don't understand why people are hating this. Yes, it's a little bit different. I didn't mind the multiverse stuff because I'm coming also from, the Marvel era of Endgame and all that stuff. I was really eating it up. But then I sit down and I pre-ordered Rebirth. I was excited as hell to play Rebirth, and mind you, I still enjoyed my first playthrough of Rebirth. However, as I went through the game, as I went through the story, I was like, I don't know, like something about this just doesn't click with me. There's a lot that is changed that takes away from what made the OG so special. I know that by this point, there's been a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers had that have criticized it to hell, bombed it to hell, made their case and whatnot. In the beginning, I wholeheartedly disagreed. I remember I started watching Sebi Webs back like a year ago when I was really, really into Seven Rebirth. And I was like, yo, what the heck is wrong with this dude? Like, do you even like Final Fantasy? Like, do you even understand like what this is? Like this is like better graphics, the story you can, it's a different story. Yes, it's not a remake, but it's more like a sequel, this and this and that. But as I continue to listen to his arguments or his counter arguments, and I continue seeing, counter arguments from people that have actually played the different Final Fantasies, that have come from the era of Final Fantasy when Final Fantasy was great. Not good, but maybe Final Fantasy is good now, but it was once great. Every time that you ask somebody to recommend a JRPG game, Final Fantasy was at the top of the list. There was no other game that could top it. And I've played my fair share of JRPGs. I played Lunar, I played Legaia, I played Breath of Fire, Legend of Dragoon is one of my all-time favorite, which was supposed to be the Final Fantasy VII killer, right? There was nothing outside of Final Fantasy that was a clear indication that you were going to experience what a JRPG was. And during that time, I think that we underestimated what we had. And I say now we because I do now consider myself part of the group of Final Fantasy fans that are just waiting for a Final Fantasy game to give us that feeling that some of those older titles gave us. And I'm not talking about pure nostalgia, shock, or anything of the sort. I'm not talking about just the sprites or like the graphics about it or anything of the sort. No, I'm talking about combat. I'm talking about leveling systems. I'm talking about innovations within its own series within its own genre. We are missing that. I don't understand where the argument is that Final Fantasy is still great. And I've seen a couple of comments that have kind of opened my eyes to the realization that there is a group of people within the Final Fantasy community that are seemingly just either blind to the fact they either love the series too much to face the fact that it's not as great as it was, and then there's another group where I feel like they're just new Final Fantasy fans, like maybe fans of post 10 fans that really don't get it, like really don't understand that Final Fantasy is supposed to be a turn action based game. I'm not mad about I truly enjoyed the combat system in Rebirth and Remake. I feel like there's a clear evolution of, regular turn based ATB to whatever the heck Final Fantasy 13 game combat system is. Like it's still turn based, is ATB, but you only control one of the characters. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I liked it. It was fast. I feel like that was a clear evolution from what Final Fantasy X-2's combat system was, and I really really like X-2's combat system because of how fast paced it is. Final Fantasy X, as for a turn based system, is pretty fast paced. X-2 kind of just ramped it up to 100 with the combat system there, and then I can see the clear evolution from X-2 to 13. From 15 to 16, there is a clear branch off. Like now we're just catering to what is popular at that time or really popular now, which is more active action combat, which is fine. I honestly truly like Strangers of Paradise. I think Strangers of Paradise is a great Final Fantasy spinoff, but that is the key of it. It's a spin-off. It's not a numbered title. Even me knowing that it's called Final Fantasy Strangers of Paradise or Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy. Even me knowing that this is supposed to be either a prequel or a retelling of the first Final Fantasy story, I wasn't mad at it. I wasn't mad that it's a Souls action combat RPG type game. I love it. I even love the fact that they incorporated the job system into a Souls like that feels like it works very well. I don't think that anybody is mad at Strangers Paradise for being what it is. But I am slowly becoming a little jaded of the fact that Final Fantasy 16, even though I liked it, I really truly enjoyed the game itself and the combat. It's not a Final Fantasy. So I don't know. This was just more of like a trial video that I wanted to do. Just because I'm really starting out. I really want to start getting a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera, speaking about Final Fantasy and things like this. I'm just starting now to like go into the rabbit hole and like study a lot of this information so that I can give a little bit more of informed opinion as opposed to just ranting off of what I feel it is. Let me know down in the comments if you like this type of content, opinion based, Final Fantasy related, and whatnot. I am going to be working on Final Fantasy VI soon. That's going to be the game that I'm going to be playing for the next couple of weeks. Going to be making content of it. So stay tuned for the shorts specifically. I'm going to be uploading a lot of shorts of Final Fantasy 16 in the next couple of days. And then yeah, let me know what else would you like for me to dive into. Let's have these conversations. Let's have these talks about the current state of Final Fantasy, Square Enix, and as Final Fantasy fans, let's all get together and have these conversations. That I feel that for the most part, we are collectively all starting to like wake up and start having these discussions. But I feel that now more than ever, and taking a page out of so many, fantastic YouTubers that I've followed and I've watched their content, such as Final Fantasy Union, Night Sky Prince, Sebi Webbs, among others. These are just like the three top of the head. Dangso that does a lot of Final Fantasy X content and things like that. Liquid Prime or Primal Liquid, love his content. I feel that now more than ever, we have to continue as Final Fantasy fans to stay together and not let the newer fans or the newer modern Final Fantasy fans dictate what Final Fantasy should be. I think that if anything at all, I think that we should be the ones that educate them the right way, not in a combative way, not in a disrespectful way. We need to be the ones that actually set the record straight and say, and make the opposition of, hey, this sucks. Let me tell you why. Let me back it up with facts. And while I can definitely agree with you that some of these are definitely entertaining, you can definitely get some enjoyment out of the newer titles and things like that. When not, Final Fantasy does need to become the standard again. Final Fantasy was never the follower. Final Fantasy was the leader of what a JRPG should be. So I'll leave you to it. My name is XP Noise. Follow my channel, XPT Rary. Like, comment, all that YouTube jazz. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video.